Give me a G&T or GTFO, guys.
Oh, that's the first time it's happened. Guys, let's be real. This is our take 2. I accidentally deleted the first recording. So, yeah, we're back, and we're just as excited as the first time. Let's go, baby.
For the record, we've never had to do that.
Yeah, sorry. It's
Before.
been a minute. As we had discussed on the last 5 minutes, we have been really diving deep into some loons since our last episode.
True. The loons.
Jaimie and I were abroad since the last episode for our honeymoon. We hit Iceland and Ireland and read some Vineland. So
I would like to clarify that I didn't actually read any of Vineland in either of those countries.
That's okay. I did. So I covered for both of us. Let's go.
I don't think I did.
But you saw it happen.
I watched you do it.
It was around.
I considered listening to the audiobook while we were there.
I thought about it.
It passed my mind.
It counts.
Did you read other? Oh no, that's for other corners.
Oh yeah, that's
you-
true.
For a different
That's
corner.
for a different corner.
That's
Sorry.
true.
This is update corner.
But yeah, we've been gone, so there has been a bit of a delay between last episode and now, but we are officially back, having a good time, and we're going to be talking about what we are drinking.
I'm drinking a Boulevard. What I drank last time, a cucumber lime gin and tonic fling craft cocktail
Nice.
from Boulevard Brewing Company. It's delicious, as it was last time.
And continues Gin Chan as it did last time.
It's a good theme.
It is a good theme. This is the last one. I hope
Pinch
everybody.
gin.
Pinch.
I hope
That
everybody's
was mine. It was subpar.
so excited for
Ginland.
another Gin Chan episode.
Vine gin.
Unfortunately, Pynchon, Gin Chan ends here. I'm Brian, and I'm drinking a Guinness. Went on about quite a long story before that last little bit got cut out, but we did visit the Guinness brewery. Long story short, Guinness tastes better in Dublin, and they said don't drink it out of a bottle, and that is exactly what I'm doing right now. So, my bad, Guinness. Arthur, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I've
Guinness.
affronted Arthur Guinness, but that's okay. There's time to redeem. There's always taps flown with Guinness around the world, and that's what I'm drinking tonight.
Yeah. I'm Jaimie. I'm also drinking Guinness. I've almost finished mine.
Yeah, I'm almost done
That's
with
where
my-
we're at. Sorry, guys.
I'm almost done with my gin and tonic.
Because a lot happened, and then Brian deleted the recording.
Hit a quick space bar and just
Little
deleted
space bar.
everything.
So
It was a little more complicated than that, but
You tried harder to delete
regardless,
the
it still
infamous
happened.
lost 5 minutes of the pod.
Yeah.
It was
The
such
It was
long
juicy.
lost.
It was such good
It was very
content.
juicy.
I know, but yeah, I'm also having a Guinness. That's it. It's Ginchan.
Guinness.
Oh man, we are getting so derivative on this name.
Everyone has stopped. If you're still listening, we're gonna talk about the book soon.
Eventually, yeah. But since we've been gone, there has been an extensive amount of time to catch up on some media. So we're going to go around and talk about some of the media we've been consuming since last episode.
This is Danny. I read, Jaimie and I went to the lake this last weekend, and I read a French murder mystery called The Mystery of the Lost Cézanne. And it was pretty cheesy, but I liked that it takes place in the south of France. And
Do you recognize it? From
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I got to spend 3 weeks there after my freshman year of college, and I really liked the author lives there, and she references like all of the streets and the bars and like a famous bakery and other things that like X is famous for, and so it was fun to read places that I like very much recognize and like even have been.
Mm-hmm.
She splits her time between X and Paris. Her name is M.L. Longworth. And it was fine. There are 4 others in the series that follows this magistrate judge in the small town of X. And they're all kind of just like southern France, like beachy kind of novels. So I read that this weekend.
Of subgenre.
It's
Southern beachy
as we
French.
talked about during the cut part, not as good as British crime novels. But it was a good lake read.
Is that an international hot take? Like, is somebody going to hear that and be offended? Like, does somebody really go at bat for French mystery?
I don't think so. I'm calling it that because it takes place in France and she's French.
Yeah,
but
I mean, that counts. I'm just saying, do you think somebody's really at bat for like, hey, yo, French murder mystery? That's the good stuff.
of Arthur Conan Doyle and Agatha Christie.
But they've really shut the game down.
Yeah,
Agatha Christie has sold more books than literally anyone.
Yeah.
Like, that's a real fact.
Yeah, respect.
She's such a goat that, like...
I don't think you can argue with that.
They kind of...
fair.
The Brits have kind of monopolized the crime drama. Maybe that's a hot... I don't think that's a hot take. I don't know.
I don't think
we will see.
Well, comment below.
Yeah.
So I read that book and it took me like 5 minutes and it was great. It was a nice contrast to Vineland, which has taken me approximately 77 years to get through.
Approximately.
And I also read A Room with a View. No, not A Room with a View. A Room of One's Own. And that was lovely and was written in like a very long time ago and is still so relevant that it could have been written yesterday in the New Yorker.
It's pretty short, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a collection it's in story form, but it was kind of like a collection of her like thoughts, I think.
That's cool. I've never read any Virginia Woolf.
I would recommend this one as your first one because it's short and easy to get through.
You know what's interesting is I've had, I think, 3 different books of hers recommended as like that should be the first.
I mean, I haven't read any of her other ones, but
I think knowing you and knowing that you like Pynchon and knowing that we just read that and how his style is, you would prefer Mrs. Dalloway.
It is.
Oh, I think
it is an audiobook available on Audible. Which
I don't know that you should listen to Mrs. Dalloway.
Really?
No, I think you should read it.
All right, fair enough.
Because I think you should still read A Room of One's Own.
It's short.
There's gonna be like 2 pages that are the same sentence, like
one sentence.
One sentence.
Oh, I would
like
love that on my commute.
You
just
open
like
this book
and
indoctrination.
Just,
I don't think that you would hear it
I'm down for
in an audiobook. Like, I don't think you'd recognize the style as much.
Fair enough. Well, that's cool. Room of One's Own.
And then I watched Barry on HBO. Per your guys' very aggressive recommendation, which I loved.
Which it was worth it. I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, no, it totally was.
Hell yeah.
When I was Brian and I were talking to a colleague about this show, and I said that I didn't think that it was as stressful as Breaking Bad, but then I
went at bat for that.
Brian was definitely like, it definitely is, and I was like, well, I mean, it's it's stressful and it's a lot, but then I got to the end of the 2nd season and I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
I was my heart rate was a lot. And I liked it. So
nice.
That's been my media.
Cool. Yeah, since I've been gone, I miraculously have watched. Well, I watched 4 movies total on like all of the plane rides, but also since the last episode, I've also watched like multiple documentaries because I had that weekend where I watched like 3 music documentaries. So I watched the Bob Dylan documentary that's new on Netflix. I watched the John Lennon documentary on the Imagine album. Both of them are great. I think I prefer the John Lennon one a little bit more. And I also watched a Football Club Barcelona documentary over the last weekend. So yeah, few documentaries, few regular movies, a lot of them Oscar nominees because that just happens to be what planes do. They like marked it specifically on the plane. It was like, this was Oscar nominated. But I will say the best of that bunch, Isle of Dogs. Freaking love that movie. It was so good. We both watched it separately. But it was very good. I enjoyed it a lot. So that was pretty nice to catch up on some movies because I'm not really a movie guy. And so I feel a little bit more whole over there. And then also I picked up Dubliners and started reading it right before I left Dublin. And I'm in the middle of that right now, and I'm really enjoying it. I was super surprised because James Joyce often gets talked about because of the difficulty of his work, but this is not difficult at all. It's really nice.
Yeah, don't let that fool you.
No. There's still a lot to them.
Yeah.
But like they're very pleasant to read. Like they follow somebody's life very briefly.
So early in his career.
Yeah, I dig it though. I think it's cool, and like I do see some of the like things that make it a little bit more deep, I suppose, especially at the end of a lot of the stories. It's really interesting that like the characters somehow have some like dramatic change of mood or something. Like all of a sudden when things seem to be going okay for a character, like all of a sudden the last sentence will reveal that they're pissed because of like what happened over the last 10 pages. And it's like, it's just cool to see those surprise endings because he finds different ways to do it every time. But yeah, it's just really nice, and it's nice to recognize different landmarks from being there. So that's been cool. And then I have a couple Icelandic books to dive into soon enough. So I'll probably talk about those later.
I don't know. What have I been doing?
I don't know.
When our last podcast was a long time ago, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's almost a month, I think.
Yeah, I went to Long Beach in that time. I think that
I think that's true.
was after it, and I was there for an AP training for a new class that I'm teaching. So I was reading a lot of different things to plan for my new class, and I was actually thinking about teaching a room of one's own, or at least part of it, for one of my units. So I was skimming a lot of things like that, like classic literature and short stories that I could use to create my class for myself. And that was a very stressful but fun week of a lot of media consumption, because the class is based on research. Other than that, I also watched Isle of Dogs on the airplane. I was going to talk about that. I knew Brian was going to steal it from me. But it's really good. It's Wes Anderson, and it's great. It's claymation, and it made me cry.
His claymation is really good because he's
so
also
good.
done Fantastic Mr. Fox, which I
Yeah.
also watched on an
yeah.
airplane.
Yeah.
But like it's just very similar cinematography to his regular stuff. Like
But
it's
just
not.
in
It's nice
clay.
that he does it though. Like
Yeah.
the effort's still there to line up the shots that nicely.
Yeah. What else? Brian and I are watching season 3 of Stranger Things right now.
Oh, I watched that too.
Cinematography. Speaking of, the cinematography in this
Oh,
season
holy
is
shit.
crazy.
It's good.
I finished it last week. It's
Like
I don't know how many episodes there are, so I don't know how far we
8.
are.
We're like
There's
half.
8.
We're like halfway.
Yeah.
Okay.
So have you noticed? Like I don't know if I'm just imagining this because it's been a while since we've watched it. Like, do you think the cinematography is better? Like, I think it's crazy.
better than the first 2 seasons.
Yeah.
I don't notice things like that.
Oh man,
I think it was always good.
I think it was
do
always
think
good. I
it's-
feel like it
would
got
have,
better, though.
I would have
Yeah.
said it was always good. I don't know. I wouldn't have noticed if it got
I
better.
think their style has stayed the same, but they have
Yeah.
gotten better equipment.
I think so
Like
too.
that's where
They probably got a ton of funding.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like their biggest show. They broke records.
Yeah.
Netflix
I
had
think
released.
I still enjoyed the second season better than any of them. I
Really?
liked season 2 better
I'm liking season 3 a lot.
than any of them.
I like
I'm
season
not like
3.
I'm not like a Stranger Things super fan or anything, but like I'm enjoying the season quite a bit. And like I said, I think the production values have raised a lot, and I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah. It's good. Have I done anything else? I don't know. I haven't really read anything other than Vineland like consistently. So that's probably it for me.
Nice. Those are the adventures. And now we are back into the infamous Vineland by Thomas Pynchon.
Nice.
No groans this time. Dope. We are we're officially getting a little more confident, I think. So we are on.
Speak
Okay,
for yourself.
these faces.
All
are-
right.
I'm actually pretty excited to talk about this section. Despite the protestations from both of you, I think that there are some interesting things to cover. So
I just need you to find them for me.
yeah, for sure. Easy task, not a problem.
Okay.
Violin by Thomas Pynchon. Good
Do it.
stuff. My
Go.
voice cracks in the middle. Easy.
It's
Yeah, it's fine. No problem.
I'm so confident.
One of the interesting things that Danny was saying before this too, which I think is funny, is that like there's not a lot of Vineland material on the internet. So like by virtue of that, we're probably going to be easy to find online, and so like we're going to be one of the premier Vineland sources on the internet. So we apologize. apologize.
Does this count as a primary source?
We apologize in advance.
Don't trust anything we said. Maybe Brian, but no.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I'll just throw a few hot takes in there for somebody who wants to do an edgy research paper.
I will just say part of it is more difficult because we had a gap. This is like a hard book to have a gap with. I'm presuming.
Especially because the last chapter we read was 800,000 pages long.
Yeah.
I listened to the audiobook. And
interesting fact.
Interesting fact. I listened to the audiobook for most of the second half of this book because I couldn't read it. But they split up. Like the last chapter of this book, technically I think is chapter like 15. Mm-hmm. If they're not numbered, but I think there are about 15 chapters. But in the audiobook, because this book is so complicated, they split it up into like 27 chapters.
Respect.
So
they're making it a little easier.
It made it super hard when I was trying to find the parallel place in the book.
Well, I bet some of them are like where it's naturally split in the chapter anyway, because he has some of those too. But regardless,
the one before the one before our second half, the 60-page chapter before the second half, also was split in half. Or I don't even know in half. It was just split into 2 chapters.
Yeah,
and it's just like a random indented paragraph.
Like, yeah, and it doesn't even feel... I would argue that none of these chapters feel like they need to be new chapters. It all flows together. Nothing makes sense to me.
Especially because...
I disagree.
I feel like... I was actually thinking that when I was finishing the book. I feel like every chapter... Or every section of the book could have just been one... Like, it didn't... They felt arbitrary to me.
Yeah, they felt
because
arbitrary
of how many how long the chapters were. I was just like, you could either put a chapter break in here every other paragraph, or you could put none.
Yeah,
because
that's
I
fair.
felt like there were chapters where there were towards the beginning. I think there were chapters that was like, okay, this was almost like a short story. Like, we're focusing on this character now. But especially in the second half, there were chapters where it was like the first half is in this time period and it's focused on this person, and then the second half of the same chapter suddenly goes to a totally unrelated person in a different time period.
But they do transition through some like natural thing happening within the chapter. But regardless, before we get too deep into it, let's do a quick summary.
Oh, please do.
Let's talk about where we were and where we're going. So in the first half, we got introduced to a lot of the main characters. Some of them had not appeared in a very significant amount of time. Like we were talking at the end of the last episode that Zoid was just like not there since the beginning.
Yeah, I was concerned Zoid was never going to come back.
So Zoid definitely came back, which good thing. I mean, he's part of the deal. We also were learning about Fernessi, got a little bit more information about her as well. Brock, Prairie, like they all got fleshed out quite a bit. But at the end of the last section, those were kind of, I think one of the big things was like, where's Zoid? But as we get into the next part, we started to learn about the College of Surf, and this was important because it was a flashback into Fernessi being part of the 24 FPS or 24 frames per second film collective, and she starts to get a little bit deeper into her involvement with Brock Vond, which ultimately leads to the death of an unintentional leader of the People's Republic of Rock and Roll, PR3, Weed Atman. So that happens pretty early on in this section. It's a big build-up. It's a pretty significant part, but I think it's a big deal because it starts to explain why Fernessi's in witness protection. Mm-hmm. This was the place that stemmed from. As we go on, there is a lot of continued comparison with the 60s and the 80s. I think that is something that kind of threads its way throughout the entirety of the back half, as it was explored a bit in the first half, but there was a lot more in this instance. And one of the interesting parts about that is with the funding that's going down, that's the reason that Fernessi is no longer protected, and eventually toward the end of the novel, it's the reason Brock Vond ultimately doesn't get his way because he runs out of funding due to the Reagan administration. So that had also happened in the back half, and then a few other significant flashbacks that we got. This was a very flashback-heavy part of the book. We kind of worked our way backwards from the first half. And then
Yeah,
the back half was a lot of flashbacks.
A lot of first half things were explained
by the back half. And so a few of those that were kind of interesting to see as far as like family dynamics. We get to look at how Zoid and Fernessy met. And it was at a show with the surf band that she ended up finding him, and they got together.
And she was dropped off in that city by DL after they had like an argument, a falling out.
Yes. And so I think it kind of played into the tragedy of their relationship because she kind of did it as a rebound because it was kind of hinted at that her and DL had a sexual relationship to some degree. Or an intimate relationship.
Yeah.
And so it almost seemed like a rebound and kind of like played into things to come because Zoid and Fernessy ultimately end up split. But we do see the beginning of that, and we also see the birth of Prairie, which was with Zoid and Fernessy, which I thought was, I'll kind of get into this a little bit later, like a sweet moment to see how much Zoid cares about Prairie. But it was interesting because Fernessy was having a lot of issues due to like postpartum depression and also just her not being as ready for this change in her life because she had been pretty involved in a lot of high stakes things that I don't think motherhood was something that she was ready for at that particular instance. Eventually she leaves, and we're starting to piece things back together through these flashbacks. And at the end of the novel, the family gets back together. Big family reunion. So
it was like a cookout or something.
Yeah, it was just like a weird.
But that's a decent place of where we're at summary wise, I think.
Yeah.
So with all of those, I wanted to get into a couple questions now that we got to flesh out some of these characters, because as we had mentioned, a lot of them were just from these things in the present or stories about other people or viewing them through film. We started to get more deep dives into the backstory of a lot of characters and their motivations, and one of the people I want to focus on here at the beginning is Fernessy. So we had seen her involvement with the 24 frames per second. We also see her involvement with Brock. We also see her involvement with Zoid. What are your thoughts on Fernessy as a character? Is she a moral character? Is she a good character? Like, what were your feelings on her overall once you started to get a little bit more into her backstory? Like, that the main thing is the morality of it. Do you think she's like a good person?
She doesn't seem to care about.
She doesn't seem to care about anything except Brock Vaughn's Bond.
Dick.
Yeah, no, really.
And film.
Yeah.
She gets, like...
She doesn't really... Like, she was, like, totally within her, like, rights and her, like, reality to, like, really hate, like, motherhood at the beginning. But, like, after that, she kind of just, like... She was just, like, obsessed with Brock Vaughn and then, like, also having sex with Brock Vaughn. And, like, it just seemed, I don't know, it just seemed like she didn't care about much else.
She just, there's never a moment in, like, she goes about killing or leading to the death of Weed, who was an innocent player for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he fell into, like, a cult leadership position, kind
like,
of.
totally on accident.
Yeah.
He was just kind of good-looking guy. And
didn't do anything, and she was a big part of why he got murdered, and she just never really reacted to that. Like, she doesn't seem to care about anyone, really. She, like, kind of pretends that she cares about Prairie, but also then there are parts where she doesn't seem to care at all. Like, because at the first half of the novel, we get, like, kind of a flash of Fernessy thinking about, like, what does my daughter look like now? Which would lead you to believe that she cares, but I don't think that she's a moral person.
Yeah, and then, like, the back half is just kind of, like, Prairie just, like, searching for her mom and, like, Fernessy, like, not really caring in any way to, like, have any kind of relationship with her.
Yeah. Because isn't there a conversation with Hector where Hector's like, we can get you back to Vineland and do this film or some, I don't know. There's like a lot of things that
Yeah,
Hector.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
there's the Hector film, which I forgot to mention in the summary. That's the reason that everything starts to unravel, because he has enough money to counteract the money from the government, essentially.
Yeah. But like he starts out that conversation by being like, "Don't you want to see your daughter?" And she's like lukewarm
She's
on
like,
it.
I could.
She's like, I guess. And then he mentions a film, and she's like, "Oh."
yeah, I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know about morality, honestly. I think she's unlikable.
So there's no sympathetic characteristics to her, because like what about also, like, I know that she had mistakes in her past, and obviously the stuff with Prairie is pretty shitty, but what about with her relationship with Flash, who is her current husband? Like, that seems to like be a factor as well. Like, she's kind of out of this life. Like, is there any sympathy to her character at all? And I'm not saying yes or no, I'm just curious.
I think you could make the argument, like, in that respect of her, like, current family. Like, you could be, like, I don't know, with Flash and Justin. But also, she didn't seem particularly interested in her kid. Like, at the end, Prairie was the one interested in Justin.
Yeah.
Like, Prairie wanted to, like, hang out with him and was, like, playing with him and, like, put him to bed. But also, like, I don't want to, like, say that Frenessie was, like, a bad person because she didn't want to be a mom or wasn't interested in being a mom.
That's not what I think makes her a bad person. I just think she's a bad person.
Just in general.
Like, I think there are a lot of moments here where she is ambivalent.
Yeah.
Like, even starting with the FBI, it, like, she becomes a double agent. She was initially just a part of this group, and then Brock very easily persuades her to become a double agent, and then she, like, fucks people over. Like, I just don't think she cares about anybody.
She seems also kind of easily swayed. Like,
Yeah.
and it's just kind of like, where's your, like, set of morals? Like, what kind of compass are you following? Because it was super hard to follow her, I feel like.
Yeah, I don't think she cares about anything.
Yeah.
She's just there.
I just think it is interesting. Like the part that I felt most sympathetic, obviously, was with the postpartum depression with Prairie.
Yeah.
That was like a very low point for her, and it wasn't something that you felt for because it was something essentially out of her control. It was just, as what happens, it's just a chemical reaction. But the other thing is when you talk about Brock Vaughn and the easiness to persuade, and looking at the themes of the novel of like 80s and the government versus like free-willed people in the 60s, Brock Vaughn does also explain his like predilection toward the easily manipulated, and that she is a product of that time and of the demographic that he particularly specializes in. So that was the other part of it to me, that like maybe it wasn't the best way to go about it as far as the storytelling, to like all lay it down to sexual desire. But I think that like kind of plays into her role in like the younger free-willed crowd and its obsession with like free love at the time, and then Brock's ability to take advantage of people that are of that mindset in the first place. So I think that like there is some sympathy in that. I don't think that it was like super well tackled in this instance as far as like the story goes, but I find some sympathy in that because it does specifically talk about Brock's specialty in that area as an agent of the government,
And like being able to manipulate
of that particular group. But like I totally agree with you guys as well. There's a lot to not like about Frenessie, which is kind of an interesting thing to see it all build up to like finding her in the first place. Because it does like end up where the family reunion, a lot of that is about Prairie.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have access to each other anyway. So I want to move that in then to another character who showed up this time around, Zoid. What are your feelings about Zoid now that it's come through? Do you think that he's a moral character? Once you found out about what he had to deal with, especially in regard to your feelings on Frenessie, Zoid is in the front lines of all of this, where he again was caught up in this rebound with Frenessie and to him, it probably seemed like a pretty good deal. He was just kind of schlepping around playing music, and this just kind of happened to him. So, like, how do you feel about Zoid now, just with what you've learned about his past, and then also in relation to your thoughts on Frenessy now?
I don't know. I like Zoid better than Frenessy, but I found his character much more interesting at the beginning of the novel than I do at the end. And, like, I don't know why that is, because they added layers to him, and he maybe should be more likable because he, like, tried to do what was best for his daughter when his wife disappeared. But I just was kind of bored with him. Like, the sections with Zoid I didn't care about.
Yeah, I feel like he seemed like he made a lot of moves with, like, Prairie. But then when it came to Frenessy, like, back around later when he's, like, talking to Flash about Frenessy, like, he just seemed a little bit pathetic, like, when it came to Frenessy. Kind of just like, well, it was all out of my hands, and, like, she just was going to do what she wanted to do. And I never really felt like he fought very hard. But, like, I don't know. I feel sympathy toward him, and also, like, thought that he, like, some of his redeeming characteristics were, like, when he stepped up when it came to his daughter.
Yeah. Yeah, so do you think that he is, like, a good dad also? That's the other thing of it, because, you know, there's some instances where I was conflicted on, like, how nice the moment was, because Zoid has tendencies to do dumb hippie things. Like, he was tripping acid when his daughter was born, but at the same time, he, like, described the moment for himself and how it was, like, a life-changing thing. He was, like, saying within that section, it's like one of those things I'll never forget. He said that it stayed with him for an extended period of time, and then, like, tried to do well by Prairie, but obviously still, as we saw at the beginning of the book, in the present day, hasn't really gotten things totally figured out. But Prairie also seems to be more with it than almost anybody else in the book, in my opinion. So what does that say about Zoid in that instance? Because we really get into, especially when we start looking into the beginnings of Vineland and him being around for Prairie's birth, that I think it reveals a lot about his ability, and you have to fill in some of the lines, but, like, with balancing out the dumb things that he's done and the decisions that he makes, would you consider him a good father?
I think comparatively he's a good father. Like, I don't know. I just feel like he's a direct contrast to... Why are you looking at me like that?
I'm not. I'm curious.
I just feel like in a direct contrast to the way that Frenessy, like, almost, like, rejects, like, Prairie. Like, he steps up, like, when he... And, like, I mean, he doesn't... I don't think he automatically... Like, he immediately wants to go... What happens when he takes Prairie? I can't remember.
That's like when, right, this is Hector offering him the mental illness.
He doesn't immediately
to get him out of the
that,
way,
right?
To get him out of the way, but also to, like, know where he is.
Yeah.
He had to keep up with those, like, cashing those checks so that everybody knew that he wasn't trying to, like, get Frenessy, right? Or was that...
Or
they
just,
just wanted to keep tabs on him.
Yeah, get involved with any other, like,
any
investigations.
Person, yeah.
He immediately, like, he didn't, like, immediately take that offer, did he?
No.
He just seemed
they
really...
discussed it for a while, but I don't know if there was a reason that he was, like, questioning it. He just was like, I don't know.
It seemed more like he was just questioning it because he was like, I don't know what the good decision is for my kid, which like is what it felt like to me, which leads me to think that he was, like, a pretty decent dad considering the circumstances. Yeah. I don't think his overall choices were great if you wanted to be a dad at some point in your life.
Right.
But I do think that, like, given the circumstances and his, like, wife who's kind of like, fuck everything, like, he just... he eventually stepped up and
Yeah.
like did like provided
he
the minimum.
tries and he cares. Like he does care about Prairie, and we see that.
Notice that multiple times.
We see that in the first half of the book too, of like he doesn't like Prairie's boyfriend, and that's such like a protective dad thing to do.
Isaiah 2:4.
Yeah, which did yeah
He comes
He
back.
comes back,
came
yeah.
back.
At the family reunion.
Yeah.
yeah. But we don't really learn what
He's my
happens
favorite. No, I'm just kidding. I love Isaiah
Hot
2:4.
take.
I hate everybody.
Well, okay, so this is a thing that I want to get into, because I talked about instances where, like, tropes of Pynchon's writing can be found. Like, there are better instances of those tropes in other novels, and one thing that is definitely one of those tropes is that Pynchon's characters are never really like that special overall. Like, even if they're the protagonist, they're never like that game changing of a person for the most part, because they're just experiencing life under the powers that be. Like, a lot of it is exploring, you know, a very particular instance of somebody being affected from the larger order of things. And so in some novels, like in Gravity's Rainbow, in the midst of World War II, where that's very prevalent because it's just a bunch of leaders that are like, we don't really give a fuck about you guys. Like, we're just doing what we need to do to like get power, get money, whatever else. Like, those instances were really powerful because all these people that are out in this war are just like, we just want to survive. Mm-hmm. And it's impossible because of the circumstances. And here it was a little more interesting because, you know, it was exploring some like persecution from the government against like hippies, but it's not as important of an idea overall as it would be for like soldiers in World War II. And so I think that is part of what plays into this, because like from what it sounds like, there wasn't a lot of favorite characters. Did you have somebody that you gravitated toward at all in this novel?
I liked Prairie the best.
Mm-hmm. I latched on to Prairie because I felt like she was like the one who had her shit together. Like, she was the one that I could follow.
I think she's honestly one of the only like truly likable characters.
Yeah.
Zoid is fine, but there's a lot going on there. And I just got bored with him more. I was just kind of like, whatever. But Prairie, she just wants to meet her mom. Like, she's just trying to live her life. Maybe I relate to her more because she's young. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Well, and also a lot of her moments in the novel are more emotional because, first of all, she's there the most. So I would say, like, even though Zoid starts the novel and a lot of things online, like, first start with Zoid, like, Prairie is the main character.
Yeah.
Because she's there the whole time. She's involved. Even during the flashback, she's the one that the story's getting told to, or getting shown the film.
Yeah.
And so, like, that is at least one person. Like, there is somebody, because it ends with her as well. I think that's a very important thing, too, with all of the characters that are involved. Prairie's the last person, and her dog, which was nice.
Yeah, I mean, it was questionable there for a second. I just read the part about the tongues, and I was like, what's happening?
But her dog comes.
Yeah.
That's sweet. But
her dog.
But like, that is something that I will say is that, like, that is a common thing. There are notable instances like Mason and Dixon. Those two are the main people, and they're like some of my favorite characters ever. But I felt like this novel really suffered from that to a degree, that, you know, it's still playing into, you know, no one is that special because regardless, you're getting screwed over by, again, the powers that be.
I also felt like this is maybe controversial, but I felt like there were so many characters that I was just like, I don't even know. Like, I know, you know, like the like top tier, decently important ones, but they all felt like they were on the same level in terms of like character development.
Yeah.
There's like Prairie at the top, and then there's like Zoid, Frenessi, I don't even, who else? Like Hector, kind of. I don't know. I feel like there are, and DL
Brock,
and Takeshi. Like, there are, like levels of them, but I just never really, I felt like there were so many levels with so many characters that I was just kind of like, I don't know who. I feel like I had to mentally place them on tiers so that I could organize them and figure out like who was important.
Yeah. In some of the other novels too, that there is also a hierarchy, or more of an established hierarchy, especially in one of the bigger instances. And one of those characters shows up here, Crying of Lot 49. Mucho Mas is like a second tier character in that he's the husband to the main character. He is in this. I don't know if you guys remember that at all. He was like a record executive or something or other. And it was like at the beginning when when Zoid was getting into Vineland, he talked to Mucho and
vaguely.
And so he talked about and it was enough of like his character development was fleshed out enough that those tie-ins were very obvious in this story. So like it talks about his previous instance as like a radio DJ, which was the case in Crying of Lot 49, and a couple other things I don't want to get into too much for spoilers or whatever, but like it was enough that it was recognizable where Mucho comes in, and that was through like chapters of character development in the story where like there were people to latch on to. And so I kind of agree with that too, that you know there wasn't as much of the hierarchy because we had like Prairie and then
so many others.
So getting into that idea then with the powers that be, one of the main parts of the novel, aside from all of the characters, is this look at the juxtaposition of the 60s and the 80s, where it was like frequently mentioned. I have a few instances or multiple instances of notes where it continues to talk about in flashbacks in the past with Nixon's looming presence, and in the 80s with Ronald Reagan's looming presence, and how that kind of affects the lives of the characters in this case. Did you think that, that part was well done? Was there something to latch on to there? Because I think that a lot of the bulk of the novel is also focusing on that pretty deeply. And I think that a lot of the characters are just kind of stand-ins to explore this idea. Because to me, I don't think that it was as much based on the plot. It was just kind of like stand-ins of people to ruminate on the change that America had gone through and like what its various leaders actually, do to the people of the country. Was that something that you had noticed, latched onto? Like, what are your thoughts on that idea?
I have comments on this in that I have no comments because today I told Brian that I watched another booktuber's video about this book, The Book Chemist, and I read a review on Washington Post or something of Vineland, and both of those reviews talk a lot about how this novel comments so much on the evolution of the 60s and how the dream of the countercultural movement doesn't follow through in the end. And I guess I understand where that's coming from, but in the actual process of reading the book, the style and the confusing way that the plot is laid out distracted me so much that I would not have ended this book and told you that it was about that it was a commentary on how the counterculture of the 60s didn't last. Like that, I would not have made that statement to you.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I just think
I thought it was super heavy-handed.
I think that genuinely I can't read Pynchon's style. Like it doesn't make sense to me, and I like to think that I'm a pretty competent reader. Like I have an English degree.
This book made me think that I've read so many books, and this book made me just be like, I don't fucking know anything about reading.
There are so many moments in this book that I was like, I would end a section and I understood what was going on, but I could not tell you any inkling of what the purpose of it was. And I feel like, again, I'm a competent reader. I have an English degree. I've read a lot of things. But, like, if we got into why the fuck Thanatoids are ever mentioned.
Yeah, I'm not about the Thanatoids. By the fucking way.
I ruminated on that for so long.
Yeah, no.
I was like, what is the point of Weed Atman coming back? There's no purpose. He doesn't do anything.
Is the point that he was killed and then that was pointless? Because he comes back? Is that the point?
It doesn't make any sense.
I can concede on the Thanatoids. As far as the commentary on the countercultural movement and its ultimate demise, I felt like that was incredibly heavy-handed. Like, even apart from the plot lines of it, like it mentions either the years themselves or the leaders themselves frequently throughout every single chapter.
I'm not saying I didn't, like, I see it.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't, if I had no influence from anybody and I had read this whole book and they asked me what it was about, like what the purpose of it was, I would not have made that conclusion because it just seems like background noise to me.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I feel like I feel like every time he brought up like the administrations of the respective decades, I was just like, I know there's a metaphor in here, but I cannot parse out what it is. Like, I don't know like what he's trying to say in this particular instance about like this set of characters. And then he would flat out talk about he would talk about the administrations like by name. And I don't know. I felt like it was really hard for me to draw a connection.
Yeah.
It just felt like background. Like, here's what's happening in the world.
Well, I will say that the influence of like seeing summaries where it like spells out that part of it was definitely helpful. And I think having read his other work and knowing how he generally tackles the subject matter that he does tackle, because like there are a few instances of his novels, it probably could be argued that all of them are really dealing with like bigger metaphors at hand, and a lot of characters are stand-ins for like tropes of people to get the point across. But that's part of why in the discussion last episode, when we were talking about like the vast number of characters, that like to me I was saying it's unimportant at the time because I don't read these novels like that. I'm reading it for, you know, whatever message is getting across, because ultimately the characters are unimportant, as you found out at the end of the novel. Like, it's interesting to talk about now because we're at the end of it, and like to you guys, you said like it said that the characters are important, and that's fine. Like I'm totally like cool with that opinion. I'm just saying, as far as like my enjoyment of the book, I was reading it on the level, like most of the notes that I have, and I did this a lot with some of the other books that I read of his, like Gravity's Rainbow in particular, like would know some of the general themes that were going on and would make a note every single time an inkling of that came up. And so I did a similar thing here, that any time any of the mentions of the counterculture or the 60s or the 80s or Reagan or Nixon or anything else, I would make a note in here. And I thought that it became pretty interesting toward the end, because it just kind of summed up the life of a lot of you know, the people that were in Vineland at the end, their eventual assimilation into the society of that time. Like, I thought that chapter in particular, I don't know if you guys recall, but like it was in the midst of the Vineland flashbacks when a lot of them were just kind of like going about the monotony of their day, kind of miserable, but doing exactly what they needed to do to like keep things running. And it wasn't ideal situations for all of them anyway, because Zoid's essentially doing the same thing to assimilate himself into society. He has a government contract to get money every single year, and he's doing what he needs to do to keep, you know, the status quo going, but he's not any better off for it, and neither are a lot of the other members of Vineland at the end of this story. And so to me, like, that was a big climax of the novel. You know, the family reunion was, to a degree, I was a little bit more disappointed with that, but like that kind of idea where the flashback and the present were kind of like morphing into one, like that to me was a big part of the novel. And like that was something that, because I was focusing in on those other instances and making notes of those the whole time, it made it a little bit more clear. And so I think that like it definitely is more difficult, especially if you are like a character focused reader that it would make this book unenjoyable. And like I think that that's cool, but I think that that's an important distinction as well, because we kind of have different overall opinions on the novel here at the end, I'd say. But like I enjoyed it pretty well. I'd say that it definitely is like a lower tier book of his work. But I found it interesting overall, and I think that that's like part of the reason why that like it plays back to that conversation we had last episode, that like characters are important because it's focusing on a broader idea.
I think that if you told me all of this now and I had never read it, I would be like, oh great, I have things to like focus, like I can focus on this when I'm reading it. Like I was so bogged down the whole time by like trying to figure out who the fuck Hector was, or Blood, or who's the guy? Volt?
I can't remember.
What was his name?
I don't know. Zippy. There's a Zippy at some
There's
point.
a Sid something. There's a Ralph. It's so many. And I think that I will probably not do this, but like I would like to, I feel like there's a need for me to like go back and read it again and just be like, okay, I have like a few things to latch onto.
Yeah.
And like I know what I can what I can focus on, what I don't have to focus on. I've never read anything like this, and like it definitely changed the way that I have never had to focus so hard on a book in my whole life.
Yeah.
On anything.
That is a common thing, is a lot of people that read his stuff and to some degree I can see why people are like, well, why would you even want to do that in the first place? But a lot of people are very adamant about like, I loved a lot of the books the second time around. Yeah. Which makes it difficult because a lot of his books are so extraordinarily long. But like I would feel that way, that some of them I would like make my way through the whole thing and I was like, what the fuck is going on? And then I'd get to the end and like once I had all the information I was like, okay, like I get what he's talking about, and then like have revisited those ideas, even listening to podcasts from like people that go through all of his books. Like there's a Pynchon in Public podcast, shouts out to them. They go through like every chapter of every book. They're still working through them, but like listening back to those episodes and hearing them discuss it, because a lot of them it's their second time too, it made it so much better for me. Some of those books I was like, oh my god, like that's amazing. Like having known how it ends up, it made me appreciate the book a lot more. But I know a lot of people that'd be a waste of time, because there are a lot of books in this world. You don't have a lot of time to necessarily reread everything, but in some instances it might be more helpful, and in this case it would be. Is this book worth revisiting to do so? Maybe not, but I see the value in doing so.
I think that if I were in a grad program for literature and I needed to write a paper on something in American literature, I could find value in this book and I could write about it. And I would sit down and I would analyze it. If I'm
and like read it twice or more.
And I'm sure that I would like make all those connections and find them very interesting in a scholarly setting. Yeah. In a reading for fun setting, I was very disappointed. Yeah. And I think I've always said that characterization is my favorite part of novels. That's like I love a good, well fleshed out character. I love it. I grasp onto it. Even if I hate them, if they are like just so well rounded and beautiful and three-dimensional, I like eat that up. And I didn't do that with anyone in this book. And I think that's why I just got so bored. I was like, I don't care about any of your stories because nothing's happening. I don't understand why things are happening.
Yeah, and like I didn't care about any of the side stories. There were so many, and I didn't care about any of them in the second half because I cared about them because I needed to know what was going on for this podcast. But like I wasn't invested in any of the stories except for the times when it was directly related to Prairie, and I was like, oh shit, okay,
like I know that name.
She's a baby. I know this name. I can figure out what's happening. But I ended up not being invested in any of those stories because there was just so much going on, and I didn't have any. It was the second half of the book, and I didn't have any characters to latch onto. Yeah. Or I feel like maybe this is just. I don't know. I also, maybe this is a stretch, but like I didn't feel like I had that many themes to latch onto either by the second Except for Nessie, like, liking to have sex with Brock Bond.
I feel like there were so many moments where I was almost very interested and almost to a point where I was like, oh, I see an overarching theme and this is good. Like the part with talking about like the actual college days when like Frenessy gets into the FBI and is doing like that whole section was interesting to me. And then it moved on and started talking about Thanatoids and I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like this doesn't make any sense to me and I don't understand how it's adding to the overall like arch of the story. I also, this is somewhat unrelated, but I said I read a review. It was from The Guardian today. And one of the early paragraphs I took a picture of because I was like, yep, that's what's happening here. And it says, the reviewer is talking about how he reread Vineland and had thoughts on it or whatever. But the first time he read Vineland, I was an inquisitive male postgraduate in my early 20s, a classic potential Pynchon reader. And I was like, yep, that sounds right. And I'm not that.
Yeah.
And I don't care.
I was intrigued enough to read another one of his books, but it will probably be a while before I do it.
Yeah.
I'll probably read Crying of Lot 49 eventually, and I will approach it differently.
Yeah, I will approach it much differently. Like maybe when I have time to hole myself up in a room and like write a paper on it.
It still is pretty thick. I'll just say that, like as far as density of the text, as you've seen here, like he can fill 100 pages with something that
with
is
one sentence.
So it can be difficult, and so I will just say that. But I like Crying of Lot 49 quite a bit. But regardless, as we're moving into the end here, we had some negativity, a lot of negativity, which is fair. I kind of expected it to be honest, but can you think of any like good moments to latch on to? Were there any favorite moments that you had with the book overall or with the back half? Was there something that was a little bit more positive about the style maybe because it was so new? Like, was there anything? And if not, that's cool too, but I'm just curious.
Well, I already said I liked the section about Frenessy's college days or whatever when they're doing PR3.
PR3 was tough.
I thought that part was interesting, and I understood it.
I feel like my threshold is also I understood it, and therefore I liked it.
There are parts also. There are parts from the first half that I enjoyed a lot, and I thought they were going to be fleshed out in different ways. And now looking back, I don't enjoy them as much because I didn't feel any closure on them. Like, I liked Zoid's arc in the first half, and I liked like the weird kind of science fiction stuff, but again, the science fiction stuff was never explained well enough for me to like feel satisfied at the end. Like the weird, like there's a spaceship and aliens maybe.
If you're going to put that in there, you better tell me at least one sentence about why it's there.
Yeah. Like I just want to know.
Like just imply it somewhere.
So I enjoyed reading that section, but then at the end I felt disappointed.
That's fair.
I liked whenever we went back to Prairie watching the film. I felt like, again, I could like kind of latch onto that, but like I enjoyed the kind of weird DL Takeshi situation. Yeah. I liked them.
Yeah, they had closure. They started enjoying each other.
They did
sexually.
Hey. They did start enjoying each other after a no sex pact, but like they enjoyed each other without sex first.
Yeah,
and.
But that's why it was good closure.
Yeah, I mean, I liked them a lot, and I liked them with Prairie too. I felt like they kind of took her under their wings a little bit, and
she needed it.
And she needed it.
Well, that was
I liked
a sweet,
DL a lot.
That was a sweet
DL
moment.
As a character, I did like.
Well, that was one of the things when they were driving around. There were a lot of instances where coming out of those flashbacks with all of them, like I liked the way that we were brought back into the reality. Like he found different ways of doing it, but one of the sweet ones was when she was in the car with the two of them, and she was like if only this were like my family. Like it would be nice if this was just something that we were all like reminiscing on like old memories and that we were just heading to the beach. But then she's like, but in all actuality, we were still looking for my mom. Like it was stuff like that was nice because she did get a bond with DL and Takeshi.
Yeah, I liked their little trio. I was a fan of them.
Yeah.
For me, I like some of the cheesy wordplay that goes on every once in a while. I think I marked my favorite one down here. It was about when DL was picking a lock, and it said that she did it so elegantly that you couldn't say jimmied. She more like Jamesed the side door lock.
I loved that. I remember I dog-eared that page because I loved it.
I thought that was so funny. And it's just different things like that. And like one of the other ones, just like a random thing. And like sometimes it can get cheesy, but I like it because a lot of times like he'll get pretty serious. And so to like have these interjections where like it's just a dumb metaphor or something I liked. And so in one of the instances when Prairie had just gotten done watching one of the films of her mother, it said Prairie re-entering non-movie space felt like the basketball after a Lakers game. Alive, resilient, still pressurized with spirit, yet with a distinct memory of having been for a few hours expertly bounced. Like it's just things like that I just like. I just think it's funny for him to like throw things like that in, especially with like more modern references. And there was a lot of Star Trek that was tied in as well. There was like multiple instances of like Star Trek parody or different things like that. And then I also liked the brief flashback within a flashback of Frenessie's parents when they were going back to when they were younger, and they were talking about their instances of being the counterculture, with some of the parallels there where they were talking about like, I believe they were talking about some of their instances of being pissed off about the Japanese internment camps or the detention camps. And so that was like the political battle of their day, again, like re-highlighting the struggle of like the counterculture versus the establishment. And then also talking about like some of the music they were listening to. They're like old hit music like Miles and Dizzy and Bird. And so there were parallels like that. And I think that it kind of gave a cyclical nature to the story as well, because it seems as though Prairie's going to be like maybe the next instance of like carrying that on a little bit of like, you know, all of the 60s children have had their day, and it's time for like Prairie to be the next step of that. I think she's found good characteristics of everybody, which is why I liked her character resolution, that she was somebody that was like enjoyable, because it felt like she learned from like the mistakes of her past, but is taking like the fighting spirit forward and is going to be like that influence for the next generation as they buckle down for what their political struggle of the day is. And in this case, it's Ronald Reagan. So I thought that those were all kind of things that I enjoyed about the story. And with that, I think we're running toward the end here. And so we kind of talked about it already, but as far as final thoughts, we'll just make this pretty brief. But did you like the first half or the second half more? Did you think that it got better over time or whatever else? Would you read another Pynchon? Under what circumstances? And then any other quick thoughts?
I think I liked the first half better because I would have written the second half differently to give myself closure. I will probably read another Pynchon novel because there's 20 of them in my house. And Brian likes them and I like Brian, so I'll try. But I probably wouldn't recommend this book to any of my friends.
Nice.
I think I liked the second half better. I felt like I had a little more. I feel like there were at least references back to the first half, which I could grasp. I did, yeah, like I said, I liked Prairie and Deal and Takeshi together. I thought that was nice. I will read another Thomas Pynchon, but I don't know which one. It'll probably be a little while. I don't necessarily. I don't think I would not recommend this book. I just feel like you have to be very, like, specifically interested in Thomas Pynchon in order to read this book.
I would agree.
If I
with
meet
that.
somebody like Brian, who likes to be confused,
Like, I would recommend this to maybe Corey.
I don't think Corey
Corey
would
would
like it.
hate
No,
it.
he'd hate it.
I
would
feel
hate
like
it.
he likes confusing
man.
stuff.
No, he would hate
doesn't.
it.
He doesn't?
No, he'd hate it.
He'd hate it.
Oh God. Okay.
Do not recommend.
I will
it.
not. Corey, don't listen to this part.
Yeah. Corey's already read other things on my recommendation that didn't go well, so.
Yeah, no, Corey would hate it.
But I respect him for doing it. He did it. He chose like long ones.
He
and I was like,
read Infinite Jest and hated it.
but he
If I
finished
had-
it.
If I had
but he
known
finished
that,
it.
I mean, I would do that. I finish books I hate, but like, I feel if I had known that he read into an Infinite Jest and didn't like it, then I wouldn't have recommended this book to him. So
You
I'm
just
taking it
don't
all
know
back.
our brother.
I clearly don't know him because I don't. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that I would discourage anybody from reading this, but I kind of would just. I mean.
But if somebody asked me, like, "Oh, what's a good book you've read recently?" this isn't gonna come up.
No, I would be like,
That's
if
what
you
I mean
if
more,
you enjoy
like-
being
I know.
confused for 400 pages, this is the book for you.
At work, people keep being like, "What book are you doing on the podcast?" And I'm just like, "I don't want to tell you because you won't like it."
Yeah, you will not understand.
like I kept trying to like play it down and be like, "But I'm reading Dubliners. You'll like that one." So yeah, that's cool. I respect all of that, and for me, I like the second half better. I would not recommend this right away to people. I think that this is definitely like you've read other Pynchon novels. If you like Pynchon stuff, I think you'd like it. And I think like a little bit of extra research into the themes would help. Obviously, from what we've said, it may help to center your mind around like a lack of characterization and a focus on ideas and philosophy and different things like that. So no, I wouldn't recommend this to any immediate readers. This would not be a good first Pynchon novel, but I'm glad we did it, guys.
I'm
glad
proud
to
of
have
us.
read
I
it.
think the discussions for both, like having this like dissension, was helpful. Like I think it fostered good discussion.
We should always read books that we hate.
Well, somebody has to like it. Like one person has to like it. Agreed. We can never do a podcast unless one
I
person
mean,
likes
Jaimie
it.
and I were talking about this weekend. Like, I appreciate things like school and like classes.
Like school.
No, that make me
Like
Education.
I wasn't done. That make me read things that I wouldn't normally read.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever would have picked up a Thomas Pynchon book had it not been for this podcast.
Boom.
And that's valuable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, at least we can definitively say that we are closing this chapter of the podcast. Jaimie's hyped as fuck. So yeah, we are done with Vineland, which is exciting. We've been kind of sitting on this one for a minute because of the long delay. But next week we will be joined by a new guest.
Yes.
First time on the show.
An esteemed colleague.
And we will be doing Jaimie's novel, which is
The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead.
So that'll be pretty cool. I'm excited for that. That was same Man Booker nomination class or whatever as Lincoln and the Bardo.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be cool to kind of.
Colson Whitehead just published a new novel.
Yeah, I did see that. That's cool.
Awesome.
So we'll be getting that clout from
Clout,
Colson Whitehead,
clout.
baby. And then
I've
after
already
that,
read Colson Whitehead.
after that, we'll be doing Danny's novel, which is
Northwest by Zadie Smith.
nice. And then so that'll be 2 episodes of that, and then we will have a season finale. I'm gonna start getting you guys the questions we're gonna do for that early, so you can think about it ahead of time. I'll just get a quick outline.
Okay.
Because we're gonna get deep. We're gonna get deep into every We're gonna rate every aspect of every podcast.
All right.
We're
You
gonna
better start now.
We're
If
gonna
we're
rate
rating all-
scats.
if
We're
we're
gonna
rating
rate
all the
beers.
books,
We're gonna
I'm
rate
say, spoiler alert right now. Vineland's at the bottom of it.
Oh, we're not done though. We're not done though, baby.
It doesn't matter what else we read.
Oh, we'll see. I've heard Northwest pretty shit. No, I'm just kidding.
Rude.
I'm kidding.
We are judging so
I'm
hard.
Kidding. So yeah, thank you guys for joining us for another episode. Hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, give us another shot.
Try again. Listen to another hour of this.
Next time. Invest another hour of your time in us.
2 hours maybe at this point. This is part 2, so we apologize if we've gone to that point. So, anyway, we will catch you next time. Who wants to scat us out?
A zoobity doo dap, a zoop doo wop. A Zoid is a loser, a zoobity dap.
Oh, just at the end. We'll catch you next time.